Good evening. I call to order the March 4th, 2024 working session. The Owen J. Roberts School District Board of Directors utilizes the working session process as a way to consider agenda items as one large committee for the purposes of discussion and debate in full view of the public. Time permitting, the committee chairperson may open the meeting up for public questions on items being discussed by the committee at that time. A small change to the agenda or a note on the agenda. We are going to, the Personnel Committee will not be meeting this evening. We are going to pull the staffing recommendation out of that committee and have it as its own standing agenda item. So that being said, we're going to go directly into staffing recommendation. Dr. Stapp.
And I believe, Dr. Soto, are you kicking it off tonight?
I am, yes.
Okay, great. So for this evening, we're going to be talking about the staffing for next year. And I'm going to spend time talking about the increases and decreases that you're going to see for elementary, for middle, and for high school. Be turning it over to Mrs. Crumrine, who will discuss the budget impact for that. And Dr. Stout will give you a summary regarding the new positions that are included in our staffing recommendation. So if we can go right to the elementary page. So when we take a look at elementary, our staffing is fairly straightforward. We take a look at the projected enrollment that the board received back in the fall. We take a look at that enrollment in each grade, looking at the class size regulation for each grade and the various supports that we have in place by building. So just to orient you to the document, the current year is in the blue columns and the proposed staffing is in the yellow columns. And so just to summarize the changes that you see from the current year to next year, we do have a reduced enrollment at the elementary level. So that very first line for classroom teachers is down 6. And so please know that for our entire presentation, we do not anticipate any furloughs or any demotions. You're going to see how this staff is used flexibly. And of course, we know that we have retirements and leaves of absences also. But we have down 6 from that classroom teacher. And as well, we know that that is taking into account the projected enrollment as of right now. There are students and families who will be moving in and out throughout the summer. And if we need to add staff because of a hotspot, if we go over our class size threshold, then that is part of our staffing budget. And Ms. Crumrine will speak to that during her time as well. So you can see also that we have a planned increase in our CLAMS. That's our kindergarten support. This is the beginning of that transition for us for full day for the following year. We have an increase in our Title I support. So we mentioned earlier in the year that we have qualified a 4th school, French Creek, for Title I services. So beginning next year, they will have a Title I allocation as well. So we've leveled out our title allocation so that it matches the Title I student population in those 4 buildings. So that will leave us with 2.6 at North Coventry, 2.0 at East Coventry and East Vincent, and 1.5 at French Creek. So the actual increase to our budget regarding Title I is 2.0. And remember that Title I is funded from federal dollars. We do have an increase in special education at the elementary level. So you see that toward the bottom of the document. And when you take a look at all the pluses and all the minuses for all of elementary, it's actually just down 1.0. Moving on to middle school. So for our instructional staff at the middle school, we have some changes in our world language. We have some changes in the elective area, specifically in physical education. So we have more students who are taking a look at the PE elective. And for middle school and high school, unlike elementary, where we are really just looking at that class size, for secondary, we're looking at class size as well as what the students have chosen to take. And we do have some elective offerings in the middle school. So that accounts for the increase that you see at the middle school level. It's up by 0.6. And moving on to the high school. So high school, similarly, we have changes at the elective levels. We do have an increase in the mathematics department and an increase, a request for an instructional coach at the high school. So you can see that there are changes between the current year and the coming year are listed at 1.2. And that last chart on the last page.
Can I ask a quick question about
course,
high school staffing? We are decreasing gifted support by 0.3. Is that due to a change in the number of gifted students in the building, or a change to the number who are using gifted seminar?
It's not a change to the number who are using gifted seminar. It's a change to the overall caseload for the building.
Thank you.
So no change for the teachers who are there who only service gifted. No change at all. Okay. And that very last chart has the instructional staffing totals for elementary, for middle, and for high school. And so you can see down 1 at the elementary, up 0.6 for middle level, up 1.2 for high school, yields an increase of 0.8 overall for K through 12. So before I turn this over to Mrs. Crumrine, do you have questions about elementary, middle, or high school instructional staffing?
Thank you, Dr. Soter. Dr. Sposito, there should be one more document, and it is a summary of the cost changes and then the additional positions. There it is. So this just shows you the budget impact of all of the staffing changes. The core classroom teachers are going down 5.0, but I want to assure everyone that, as Dr. Soter mentioned, we have kids moving in, kids moving out. We monitor it weekly. And if anything goes over the instructional class size regulation, we will add a teacher. So we will always stay within the class size instructional arrangements. So we are using, just for purposes of budget right now, a master's step 1 of 61,000 for salary purposes. There will be retirements, there will be new hires, and they'll kind of be all over the map a little bit. So we always use a constant number right now when we're budgeting. So the summary that you see of core classroom, special area support, special education, and the academic coach, those total the teaching instructional staffing changes that Dr. Soter went over. So the net impact of that right now is 48,800 less the 2 grant funded positions. So we're estimating about 122,000 will offset 2 of those teaching positions because we receive additional Title I dollars for those positions. And then as we go into other staffing changes, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Stout.
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Crumrine. So a couple of additions to the staffing this year. I just want to take a moment to talk about each one of those. The first one, the academic coach at the high school that Dr. Soter referenced earlier. Currently, every building in our district right now has an academic coach except the high school. So the high school does not have an academic coach. Since I've been here, I've heard from our REA membership at the high school and from the high school administration advocating to add an academic coach. And I will also add / technology support. We've asked our teachers to do a lot with technology and instructionally with a lot of the initiatives that we have going. So in order to give the high school the same services that we give our other buildings, we thought it was important to add an academic coach at the high school. And like I said, we've held off my first 2 years as superintendent, but taking a look at the need, feel strongly that this is a position that's well needed in our high school. For twofold, like I said, the instructional side, and this is instructional working with the teachers on their instructional practices. So we have the MTSS initiative, K-12, we have UDL initiative in our district. So I think this position will be instrumental in that. And like I said, also helping our teachers with the implementation of technology in their instruction. So that's the first position. Another position that we have, and we did not reference in here, we're requesting a secondary dean of students and supervisor of student activities. And this would be at the middle school level. And a little bit of information on that. If you recall, we have a half-time dean of students at the middle school this year. That was a 1-year position, teacher on assignment, to help with the influx of discipline that we've seen in our middle school since the pandemic. I've done listening sessions in all of our schools this year, and it became very apparent to me in listening to our staff at the middle school and our administration, and Mr. Stoltzfus is here tonight if you would have additional questions about that position. But there was a strong desire, both administratively and with our staff, to have a permanent dean in the middle school to help with the increase in discipline that we've seen. I know I shared with you in Boardline a comparison of the Chester County school districts, taking a look at enrollment and their administrative structure. And for a middle school with 850 students, only having one principal and one assistant principal, we were an outlier, or we are currently an outlier with our number of administrators to support students at the middle school level. So as a result, we are recommending a dean of students, a full-time dean of students position in our middle school, but also that person will do secondary activities. So that's an area where we have a need as well. So they will be assigned primarily at the middle school, helping with the discipline and working to support the principals at the middle school, and then we'll be dealing with secondary activities. Another position that we're recommending is supervisor of data and student support systems. Now that's how Mrs. Crumrine has it characterized in her report, but in the job description, because we're constantly working on this, in the job description, we have it listed as coordinator of prevention and support services. So that's the same position, and we'll identify what it's going to be called, which is going to be coordinator of prevention and support services. However, when we were formulating this staffing report, we did not have the title for it yet. This is the position that we have had for the past 2 years. It was a teacher on assignment. Dr. Brian Schneider has been filling in that role. Brian has presented to the board several times. Again, when you talk about positions that folks are advocating for, Brian is working very closely with our principals, with our staff on our MTSS efforts in all 7 of our buildings. Additionally, Brian has been running the implementation of Linkit, which is our student data program that we've been using the last 2 years. He is the master at that, and analyzing all the data and breaking it down and getting it to the teacher level so that the teachers are able to utilize that data with the students. In addition to that, the position has also been supporting our student services director, Mr. Bentman. That position has been helping with our mental health plan and our mental health efforts. And in addition to our PBIS behavior systems that we're putting into most of our schools. So again, that's a position that we've had the last 2 years as a teacher on assignment, but this is something that we've seen a tremendous amount of value in, that we would like to move to be a permanent position. So those are the 3 positions, 3 that I want to talk about. And then there's one additional one that you have a job description for, but we did not list it in the staffing report because it does not require an increase in staffing, but I want to explain it tonight. That is for an assistant director of athletics. So we have capacity within our high school staff, specifically in our physical education department. With some declining enrollment of students taking some of our phys ed classes, we have some capacity there to assign a phys ed teacher to be an assistant athletic director during the day. That person would teach 2 classes of physical education and or health, and then would be assigned as the assistant athletic director through the remainder of the day. So again, it's something that we're still working on. We want to wait to see if we get approval from the board, but we have capacity within, so this is not an additional cost. This would just be reallocating staff to help with athletics. If you recall, we've added a lot of programs in the last couple years. The unified sports programs, we've added girls wrestling, we've added middle school lacrosse. We are going to be proposing that we add a middle school girls volleyball program. So we've continued to add athletic programs, and we put a lot more on our athletic director's plate. And there's a real need to have support in that office during the day to work with coaches, to work with rescheduling, to do budgetary needs. So this is a position that we would like to have approved as well. But again, I do want to reiterate that this is a position that would be of no additional cost, just a reallocation of some existing staff at the high school. So those are the four positions that I wanted to give you just a little bit more context on in regard to the staffing report. So I believe at this time, that's the information that we have. So we'll open it up to the board for questions that you may have on the staffing report.
I had some questions on the Dean of Students
Sure.
position, based on the data that was sent us. I saw in looking at what was provided that it appears that Corbin was able to attend a lot more meetings, be present in specialized meetings, do walkthroughs. I was curious as to what he saw as the benefits to our middle school staff and students of his being available for that.
Great. So Corbin, I'll bring you up to answer that question.
Good evening. So I think I heard what you were asking at the end. What's the benefit do I see with the staff having me out and about and students having me out?
Sure, we added this position,
Yeah.
what are the benefits to the staff and students, the overall climate of the middle school of your.
Well, I could tell you that it's certainly noticed. Earlier in the year, there were kind of, for those who know me best in the building, there was a lot of comments. What are you doing out here? This is 3 times this week that we've seen you out in the hallway here at this intersection. So it's being noticed for sure. There is a strong push to get administration in the cafeteria as well throughout the day, just to help with eyes on students. And the comment we generally heard was that students just react a little bit differently when there's an administrator in the cafeteria, when they see administrators in the hallway. I'll take their word on that. I would like to think that our teachers have the same capacity as any of our administrators do in the building. But I think one is, and I talked to Dr. Stat about this Friday, this past Friday was a great day because for the first time in a long time, I didn't have some of these meetings on my calendar. So I spent most of the day walking in and out of classrooms, and it was, for me, fantastic. And I think what it does, it helps build some of those connections that you need to have. I make sure when I get back to my office after I do walkthroughs that I send emails to teachers and just providing some positive, non-evaluative feedback, but just, hey, I loved that you did this. I thought that activity was great. And that's it, 2 sentences. And I think that helps build morale. It helps build some of that positivity that you're looking to have in the building. And for students as well, just being able to go into classrooms and look over shoulders and say, what are you working on? And they get to kind of see me in that light as well, as opposed to just the students who are maybe sent down to the office for other reasons, seeing me. So for me, it's very positive for students and teachers. I think it's positive just to see an administrator or principal out and about in the building and help set a tone. Go in and ask questions and motivate students, give them a pat on the back or a good job was great. For me, I get to see students in a different light. So oftentimes, my previous contact with a lot of students was just that they came to my office for something, and now I get to see them in a classroom raising their hand, participating, offering an answer. It's a different dynamic in that setting. And sometimes we get feedback saying that, students they act different when you walked in. And okay, but I think it's important that they see me out and about the building. So as far as the culture of the building goes, I think it's important to be visible, to be seen, to be in the hallways, to be in the classrooms, to be in the cafeteria. And for me, it's a highlight. It's what I've been missing. I think it's an important part of being a building principal as well, on top of all the other organizational pieces.
And looking at the discipline comparisons, were you comparing last year's totals to this year as of February?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And you can see it there, and we're, a few months before the end of the school year, and they're comparable right now.
Well,
So-
suspensions are up.
Correct.
And looking at the types of incidents, where do you see the majority of these incidents occurring that lead to this?
Location, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, the two greatest locations are hallways and classrooms. The highest incident location is classroom, and that's to be expected because we ask teachers to use our Swiss system. Swiss is our software that we use to report infractions. So this is something new to us this year as well. And we ask teachers to enter not just something that they need a consequence for. If there's a behavior, redirection, someone who's calling out frequently, that may not be something that's getting a consequence assigned to it, but it's something the teacher has to address. It's taking a moment away from instruction. And we ask them to report that because we're looking to track trends with certain students. We want to be able to come back later and say, if part of our MTSS process, we're looking at a student who's struggling, and we can pull up also, in addition to, guidance records and academic performance, we can pull up Swiss data and say, it seems like period 1, first thing in the morning, this student is having a lot of trouble staying on task. Let's try to figure out why that is. So we ask them to report everything. So classroom is going to be the highest because we have 75 teachers that on any given period, a dozen of them could be reporting something, a teacher handled incident in Swiss, maybe not an administrator handled, but a teacher handled incident in Swiss as well. So classrooms number 1, hallways number 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I think with the implementation of Swiss, I expected to see smaller infraction numbers go up because the ease and the ability to quickly report and gather that data. So seeing like lunch detention numbers be higher in the end of February than they were at the end of last year, I can see as Swiss implementation, if you will. The number that concerns me is our out of school suspension numbers being greater at the end of February than they were at the end of last year. And so to me, that was one of the numbers that I was looking to look at for the effectiveness of a dean of students, because my point of view is the dean of students was going to correct behaviors when they were smaller, so we wouldn't lead to some of these bigger numbers. So that's the number that really stands out to me as concerning.
Yeah, it stands out to me as concerning as well. And you look at it and you think we're handing that out like candy, but I will tell you, it's some of the behaviors are more intense than they've been as well, more frequent and more intense. And we've had more vaping, for example, in the middle school than in years past. We've had physical altercations more than we've had in years past. So some of the behaviors are not just more abundant, but they're more intense in nature, which leads to some. And some of it is students who might be assigned a different discipline, a different consequence, and refuse to sign it or refuse to attend, for example. We assign maybe an after school or Saturday. That doesn't get you an out of school right away, but then we assign maybe an in school, and they refuse to serve that. It's become difficult. We've kind of shifted the focus of our MTSS at the middle school now to primarily focus on mental health, because when we kind of try to get to the root of what's going on, the mental health piece I think is critical and crucial to kind of look at what's leading to some of the behaviors. We don't want to be in a position where we're just constantly reactive. We want to try to identify what's causing this. And there are some very unique challenges with some students right now. And there's also, there's a progressive approach with some students. When we have some students that are over 100 referrals, individual students that are over 100 referrals right now. So there's a progressive approach for some as well, who we're trying to And that's, we're not assigning consequence every time. We try to take the approach that, counseling before consequence and try to figure out and work with students. And sometimes that works. And sometimes, the adage of leading a horse to water, you can't force them to drink. That's what we're dealing with sometimes. There are some that the struggles they come to school with, are great, and just getting them regulated for any amount of time is, we measure that as success. There's some students we try to get through a period, then another period, one period at a time.
My other question was, do you feel like there has been, in the experience, has there been buy-in from families in that when they receive a consequence or a conversation with the dean of students, is there escalations, are you still seeing escalations to you as the building principal, or are families ending the conversation at the dean of students? Like, are you still dealing with a tremendous amount of escalations from that office?
No, there are times that the parents will want to talk to me as a result, and typically I support my dean and my assistant principal in the decisions they make. I will tell you that one of the strengths of our dean of students, and Deb's here, one of the strengths is that she lives in the community. She has relationships with many people in the community. She's very proactive when it comes to reaching out to families, building those relationships, so that if she's calling, it's not always to call and say, your child received this consequence. She may call with the child in the office with her, put the child on speaker, and have a live conference right there. Here's the behavior we're seeing, and we talk it out, parent, child, me, the dean. And, our goal is to get students, if we're able to, back into the classroom, back into the learning environment as quickly as we can. But we have to make sure we're doing that they're regulated in order to do that. We don't want to send them back and have them be another disruption to the next class, or get physical with someone, or use poor language, or we don't want to set ourselves up for that. But I would say typically, most 99% of families are handled by the dean. There's no need to escalate to me. If it's a more serious offense, I mentioned vaping earlier, fights, things like that, I typically will get involved immediately in those higher end things. But those aren't the ones that suck up most of the time every day. It's the lower end. It's the throwing the food in the cafeteria. It's the getting handsy with someone in the hallway. It's talking back to a teacher, refusing to go to class, eloping from a class every day, multiple times a day. Thank you.
I have a question on the position though. Yes, it's more for Jackie. Or do you see this as 50-50 dean of students? Or do you see this as dean of students and as needed support for activity?
Correct. I see it. We don't have a percentage, but the majority of it is going to be dean of students supporting the administration and the students at the middle school. And then the secondary component will be in charge of our activities at the secondary level. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the assistant athletic director position? So I know that we recently hired, so understanding the staff that's in the athletics office now, I think would help us. So we have an athletics director, we have someone currently in I don't know what the actual language
Called a
is.
stipend. We have someone who's on a stipend right now
Okay.
that helps with activities in the evening.
Okay,
So we would keep that position, but.
so this would be in addition to that.
Correct. And in talking with Randy, a lot of his help, and obviously in the evening, it's nice to have someone at the events, but a lot of his help is with the scheduling during the day and the officials during the day and the transportation during the day. That's where he needs most of his help.
There is also an assistant in that department that currently does
An administrative
an
assistant.
administrative
Correct.
assistant that
Yes.
handles scheduling and that. kind of stuff.
Correct.
So this is in addition to the staff that is currently in that office.
Correct.
No changes to their titles or assignments.
Correct.
What is the full time for the stipend position? How much is the stipend position?
I'm happy to answer that. It's stipended for 3 seasons, and it's about $16,000. It's really game manager. It's like helping with the games in the evening. That's primarily what that person does. if that makes sense.
Because a lot of evenings we have multiple activities going on at multiple venues. So to have, and Randy's typically there, but to have another person there as well, it's very helpful.
Where, is there information on this? Cause I didn't, this was a surprise to me. I did not
Yeah,
see
ju-
anything.
just
on
the
it.
job description, because there wasn't an additional cost involved with this. When we were looking at our staffing report, we had some capacity in our physical education department, so we could have collapsed a position, maybe reassigned a position, but when we were looking at needs, we didn't want to do that. We felt we have this tremendous need in our athletic department, so we could reassign someone for a portion of their day. While they're still teaching, we'd have them teach 2 sections. We can reassign someone to the athletic department to be the assistant AD and help Randy with some of those tasks that I mentioned.
I don't know how everybody else feels, but I felt like it was very very beneficial where you provided information of why the Dean of Students is important and gave us data and information as to why we should also expand this position. So I feel like if we're going to do something like this, I think it would be a great thing to have a why. Like, why do we need this other than we're adding 3 sports?
Yeah, I can talk with our athletic director and get some more specific information.
Sorry, when I looked at the, size of the department, I don't know that I anticipated when we had originally talked about this. When we had talked about this, this was an adjustment on the stipend position and not an additional 0.6 staff person. It's a pretty significant amount of, a pretty significant amount of support going into that department.
Yeah, originally when we were looking at it, we were thinking about an assistant AD adding a full-time position as a possibility. And if that were the case, we would have taken the stipend away. But when we looked at existing staff and we had that capacity, we thought we can get the help during the day with a staff member who's going to be there. But we would still need that stipend for the evening events to assist with the evening events. But we'll get you some more information on the athletics.
Thank you. Any additional questions about the staffing? So I am going to ask.
So I just saw this. So it was Dr. Snyder who was doing basically the coordinator of prevention support services at this point. Would he continue with that, or would this be somebody new and he would go do what he did prior to this?
Sure, like any position, so we would post this and it would be open for folks to apply. Brian, obviously, if he's interested, has done a fantastic job in the role for the past 2 years, but any position that we have an ad is open.
So then I am going to ask for a motion, and it can come from any board member, it does not have to be from a particular committee, to move the staffing recommendations to the full board meeting.
May I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Does that include then this assistant athletic director position? Because I want more information before I would say to move it to.
Yes, we would move the recommendation as is, but there is always time during the meeting to amend.
Okay.
If that was what you chose to ask for.
I'll make a motion then to move this forward to the full board.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Stoltzfus. Okay, we are moving on to agenda item 3, Finance, Building and Grounds Committee. Mr. Harmonos.
Good evening. The Finance, Buildings and Grounds Committee has 3 presentations tonight. Our first presentation will be the 24-25 proposed pupil services budget by Mr. Benton.
All right, good evening, everybody. Sweet. Here we go. All right, so I have the opportunity to present to you first, which is definitely exciting because it's probably the most important presentation of the evening. See some head shaking, so thank you. So I am going to present the student services or pupil services budget for this coming school year. So if we can go to the next slide, Dr. Cicito. Just an informational slide, just kind of highlight what encompasses the department. So we have quite a few areas in the department. All of those areas have a financial aspect connected to them. Obviously, starting with chapter 14, 15, and 16, special education, 504, and gifted education. And moving to related services, services that are supported, our students are supported with, such as speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. School-based access program, so financial opportunities for the district to regain some of the money back and spend it on students with disabilities and their supports. Our ELD development program, vocational program, which includes TCHS, psychological services, MTSS, which was talked a little bit about today, school counseling, school health services, attendance, registration, student homelessness resources, and then finally homeschooling and homebound. Once again, homeschooling is when students are learning from home by either a parent or a teacher or someone else. And then homebound is when a student might be in need of support at home due to a physical or mental situation going on where they need to be home learning. So just a quick agenda. Those are the 4 pieces that we're going to talk about today, and they all have something connected to them. All right, so let's get into it a little bit here. So these are a lot of categories. There's a lot of information and a lot of numbers here. So I'm kind of going to highlight each one briefly and kind of run down the kind of what's involved and what encompasses each of those areas. So number 1 is our financial impact for our students that are in low incident placements. Those are students with autism or the students that need life skills support. High level of care based off of the individual student. Please understand this could go across a wide spectrum of supports and services. So this encompasses 26 students, also includes some of the cost of the aids that are needed in some of these programs. And so that is highlighted there. We have our learning support supports for students. So these are supports for services, students attending TCHS. So when a student goes to TCHS for vocational programming, we want to make sure that we have an inclusive environment, meaning and supports for them. So a student with disabilities can and should attend any program that they would like, and then that would fit their need. But we also want to make sure that their IEP is taken care of and those supports and services are there. I talked a little bit about the related service piece. That is, once again, our speech, our hearing, our vision, maybe students that are hard of hearing as well, and they get those supports either through the IU or some of our related service providers that we contract out throughout the district. We have a gifted line item in there as well. We provide opportunities for students that might kind of move through the math process and might take advantage of maybe like a multivariable calculus class if it matches up with maybe what they want to do post-grad. So we have some money there to support students that might need higher level courses as they kind of go up. Also, some money in there, obviously, for supplies and things like that for our gifted department. Our English language development, you're going to see a little bit of an increase here this year for our ELD program, and a lot of that is our new curriculum delivery process through, you'll hear about National Geographic. So that's a purchase, that's a little bit of a bigger purchase this school year. So this school year, we serviced 79 students. Just to give you a little taste of what we did in 2021-22 was 50 students. So it's increased over the last several years. Seeing a little bit of a kind of a steady kind of plateau with our increase in our services. We still students are coming, but we're thankful that we have those 3 teachers in there as well. And then some translation services for those students as well. So we have several teachers that are bilingual that provide translation services for our families. Moving on, we have our special placement and our transition services. So I did combine these. These are student placements that include what's called APSs or approved private schools. such as Camp Hill, Vanguard, Pathway, PA School for the Deaf, just a few. And then we have our transition services for our 18 to 22. Just a reminder that now it goes to their 22nd birthday, used to be 21st. So that was a change. So we provide vocational job education. So total, we have 23 kids between our students that are in APSs or approved private schools and students that are in our transition services that receive vocational job education. And our vocational education, this is a 3-year average for our TCHS tuition rate. We have 7 kids in our Homeland kind of police program up in Octorara. We have 4 full-time students and we have 173 part-time students in our TCHS program. That's growing and that will continue to grow. I know the IU is looking, I know we hear from Mrs. Munson each month, but the IU is always looking to bolster those programs at the IU because we are seeing students interested in those programs and they do quite well after graduating from those programs. It's a very lucrative career opportunity for students, but increasing each year. We have our early intervention students entering kindergarten with IEPs. We're seeing a rather big increase, and I mentioned this to the board as well. Some of our neighboring colleagues in Montgomery County and Chester County are also seeing an increase in early intervention supports for students coming in that may have a disability. Our extended school year, our ESY program for our high school, middle school, and elementary school each summer. We support our students that need continued services so they don't regress, right? So that's the goal. That's really the main factor in an ESY program is to continue that support so we don't see a decline in growth, but a steady or an increase. Go ahead.
Question.
Sure.
You said there was an increase in early intervention, but the budget is showing a decrease.
So increase in students, that's a tough one because the students coming in, we don't know exactly the supports they may need. In fact, some come in with kind of an early intervention IEP, but might not need one as they enter. So we base that off of kind of outside placements that students might need. A lot of those students too could be speech and language. So a good percentage of those 74 students are speech and language only, meaning they would just get support services through a speech and language pathologist and not have a academic IEP. Best way, I guess I can put it. A good question though. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. That's helpful. Homebound services for students in hospital settings that might be recuperating at home. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of students like that, right? But we do have some health students with health issues that need that. Our guidance psychological services. So these include our 2 social workers. So we have a social worker at the high school and the middle school, kind of takes care of secondary. And then we got a social worker at the elementary level as well. So that's part of those costs. Alternative ed. So we do pay for 1 seat for our alternative education for disruptive youth. Alternative education for disruptive youth. This is a 45-day placement that we hold if needed. Typically, probably 100% of the time, it is a disciplinary type of placement that occurs when a student has a serious disciplinary matter, for example, causing serious bodily injury or harm. Our pupil service operations programs like Decision Insight that we're going to be using for our kindergarten, full day kindergarten, how we'll get numbers, and I've talked about those services as well. Legal services and settlements speaks for itself. Transportation for the cost to have aides on buses. So some of our students need aides on buses for not only their safety, but maybe health reasons as well, or safety reasons. CCIU operations. This is a figure that they generate and provide to us. It's an extra cost from CCIU. And then last but not least, we have our charter schools. Just a quick update on charter school numbers for you. So in 1920, we were at a total of 177. 2021, we were at 250. 21-22, 197. 22-23, 172. And you're going to ask me for 23-24, and that we are at, I believe, 166 for that number, but I want to double check that. If I think it's 166, I'm correct. 166 for that. That includes cyber and brick and mortar. So there is a difference between cyber and brick and mortar. You're looking at this year, on average, you're looking a little more cyber than brick and mortar, maybe about 10 to 15 more in a cyber program than brick and mortar. They're also more plentiful, I think, and kind of easier to get into, less of a waiting list.
So are we looking at an increase for the 24-25 then? Going to charter?
The increase is actually based on the tuition rates. So the
Okay.
tuition rates are increasing because it goes to the most previous fiscal year's financial statements. So the costs have increased. Not
And
a large increase in number of students. But the one good thing I could mention, we haven't reflected this yet, and I don't know if it will come to fruition, but the state budget does have a proposal to cap cyber tuition at $8,000 per student per year. That would be significant, hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings for us. But there's always some type of a proposal in the state's budget, and we never know. I mean, it hasn't made it in the past, so there's kind of a little bit of a voucher war going on there. So we'll hold it until we know more.
also the vocational education, is that an increase due to students or an increase due to also the same thing, cost increase?
I would say it's a little bit of both, but there is a cost increase. I think there was a 4% increase for next year, which is a good chunk of change. So if we can move on, Dr. Cicito, to our IDEA, Individual Disabilities Education Act. So these are our funds that are, as you can read, but just real quick, they are federally funded program to support our students with disabilities. So we have number one is transition services for the high school. So you heard us talk about our transition coordinator at times. Throughout our sessions, we have a transition coordinator that helps and supports our students transition from high school to post-secondary opportunities, whether it's college, whether it's job opportunities or trade school or anything else, military. That service is very beneficial and very helpful to the high school. Our pupil services staff. So within that budget line item, we have 3 IEP facilitators. Those are REA members, a part of the union, and help support the department, are very beneficial to, I would say, the teachers. It's a fantastic service that we provide. It helps mainly with our IEPs, staying in compliance, supporting the teachers, being LEAs during meetings. And they've done. I gotta actually give a shout out to our 3 IEP facilities because they've gone above and beyond this year with some certain situations that we needed help in the department, and I'm pretty proud of their work. We have a 0.5 IEP scheduler, so that's a person who works over at Warwick that helps schedule IEPs for teachers. Once again, another service for our teachers. Helps with that process to get those meetings all in. And then 0.5 supervisor of special education. So we have 3 supervisors of special education, but out of this budget, we have 0.5 of our supervisors, 2 of them are funded through the department. We have emotional support staff, or I should say services that are embedded within our budget. They actually are a mental health clinician. We have a mental health clinician over at the elementary. We also coordinate early intervention services through some of the supports through some of our students with those funds as well. And then some software and supplies. TyNet is a big one. We use TyNet to manage our IEPs. And that's a program that special education teachers are using, and gifted education teachers are using constantly. They're probably on that the most than anything else. right, Dr. Cicito, if you can move on. And then we have money generated for the district through access funds. So we're able to make money for the district for our students at the end of the day. You can see that the figures there, they are quite large, and the funds come from recouping money for services such as OT, PT, and things like that. So we have 4 areas here. Number one, we use funds for pupil service staff. So we have a special education teacher, actually one of our most support teachers at the high school building. We have an administrative assistant and 0.5 of our compliance coordinator, who is Mary White, who supports our services, our financial services and grants in the district, not only in my department, but other departments as well. We have our psychological, emotional support nursing students. So we have 6 mental health clinicians that are funded with these funds, 3 school psychologists, and 2 registered behavioral technicians. We call them RBTs, but we'll stick with registered behavioral technicians. So this money does not include any student placements.
Question. How does this line, is this part of the piece that was on the previous 2 pages back for guidance psychological services?
No, different, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So we've got 758 there, million here. Okay.
I have to say, I feel like I'm really confused by when we look at this compared to 2 slides ago. Because you were saying like it pupil services budget for the guidance psychological services. I'll use that as an example. And you're naming positions underneath there, and then you come down to the access and you're naming positions under there. That makes it sound like we have a lot more like guidance counselors than we actually do. So I guess I'm just very confused and about, is this in addition to, or does this cover, is this money covering some of those? Like, I just don't quite understand.
The access money covers positions, but they're 2 different buckets, and they're different people too as well. So they're not, these two things aren't intermingled unless it's like a 0.5 or it says 0.15. In some situations, they're coming out of several different kind of line items, but they are two different things. And I can see, because it is the only budget where with the access funds, it's like money coming in because our kids are getting services. So then we're spending that money for special education services. Just to kind of so, you know, and Mrs. Sabo, we really do have these kind of positions and then how they're funded. So if we're looking at it as positions, right, we have 6 mental health clinicians that service students with IEPs. We have 6 school psychologists who go through the process to evaluate students. Those school psychologists, some of them are paid out of different buckets of money. Mental health clinicians, I talked about the 6, that's kind of the same one. But then we have one who primarily is at a few of the elementary schools, who was brought in to help support our emotional support program that we brought in from the IU. So the IU used to house it. We took it over years ago, right? And so with that, we took over that position to help support that program. So I'm hopefully I'm explaining it, making it a little more clear, but there aren't any added positions in this budget that would have been in personnel. This is just how we kind of pay for these things. And I will say that we kind of work some magic in this throughout the budget because it allows us to have some of these unique positions like RBTs, registered behavioral technicians, to help and support our students. So we kind of get creative through this process.
I think the only thing I would want to clarify too is there are 3, I'm going to call them buckets of money just to make it easy to understand. There are the access funds and the access budget. So access funds come into the district and fully fund all of these costs. The IDE federal dollars, the slide before, those grant funds come into the district and fully fund the IDEA funds. The prior slide, the first slide, that is our student services general operating fund budget. which is supported in the, by school district taxpayer dollars. Just to clarify those three buckets. They really all are
So-
housed under student services.
So for instance, like if you look at something that has the same name, if you grouped it all together, then you would have to indicate how much of that was being covered by IDEA and how much of it was being covered by Access. So you broke it into 3 slides instead.
Yes, because each of these grants, like Access and IDEA, they're very particular in what qualifies to be funded there. So we have to follow those regulations. If that makes sense. They're federal dollars, 2 different buckets of federal dollars. They will not fund everything. That's why there is a general fund operations budget.
Are these numbers primarily staff? Or is it other things too?
Which, all of it or specific slide?
Like the psychological, emotional support nursing services and the
Yes.
guidance psych services.
No student placement. So if you're on access funds and you're under psychological emotional support nursing services, that's staff,
That's all staff.
mostly staff.
Okay.
Mostly contracted service staff,
Yeah.
just to be clear too.
Oh, okay, not in-house.
Yeah. A lot of my department staff is contracted. Our
Okay.
supervisors are district employees, our IEP facilitators are district employees, obviously nursing, psychologists, it's 50-50. I'll talk a little bit about that in the special ed plan. And then as you go, becomes more contracted.
And are we contracting these because it's kind of piecemeal or, is there savings there if we hire these people directly, or we can't do that the way the budget is, the access fund is distributed? How's that work? Walk me through that.
I'm happy to help clarify that. When there are so many needs right now, and it's not just O&J Roberts, there is a shortage. We are turning to PTS and other contractors to help supplement the services that we provide. That being said, the IU really specializes in providing services, these types of services for all of the schools in the county. So they really make an effort to recruit and obtain these mental health clinicians and other types of services. So we have members that are in our teaching contract and in our Act 93 group that are consistent contracts that we always fund through payroll. There are a myriad of services that go up and down, mental health needs and different types of services that you may need more one year than you need the next, depending on the students that you're servicing. So that's why we supplement with contracted services. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to add to, there is a big humanistic side to the piece, and we really incorporate our people, and Dr. Stout and my department doing a really nice job of, like, you wouldn't be able to tell who's our employee, who's getting an OJR paycheck, and who is not. I think that's a very important piece to it, because we are a team to support our students and really try to embrace and they're part of our family. So moving on to school health services. Dr. Cicito, thank you. So these are our nursing services, obviously a lot smaller. A lot of the money in this is our automated external defibrillators, our AED machines that are spread throughout our campuses and our buildings. We are working on a grant for that, which we're pretty excited about. But it is a constant maintenance because they expire and the pads and things like that. So yeah, so we have the supports there. And then the nursing supplies, obviously they need supplies in their offices. Other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the board?
Okay. A couple questions about your presentation.
Sure.
The homebound students who are homebound, do they get all their subjects? Do they get just the, math, science, or studies, ELA?
Great question. You get 5 hours of instruction a week, one-on-one instruction a week. Now, we could provide more. Our teachers volunteer to do that. So if a seventh grader is out on a homebound, Dr. Ball finds a teacher that's might be interested in teaching that student, and then they meet with them either in the house, maybe in a kind of a library, or virtual is an option. It's kind of last resort, but it works for some people, and they get one-on-one support for 5 hours a week, and then cover all the areas. It turns into almost like a quasi kind of cyber environment now that we have the tools from the technology department to do a nice job with that. So it's evolved over time.
The Octorara program.
Hmm.
So we have, I think you said 7 students.
Yes.
Okay. So how do they learn about that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So another area to highlight in my department is our high school counselors. They've really done an amazing job the last couple of years, and this year beefing up their the access to careers and opportunities for students other than our traditional learning in the high school. So they make that part of their presentations. They recently had a career and technical job fair, so that's all part of it. The only issue with that is the distance. So it's a far trip, so it's time on the bus. But the kids that go enjoy it and they like it.
I was talking to a parent the other day. Son, yeah, she was just saying how much it's kind of helped her son. One more question. The charter school program? Yeah, we have, well, not program, but the kids who attend charter, do we interview the families at all? Do we try and find out
do.
why aren't they here?
So my department has kind of done an outreach the last 2 years, maybe 2+ years. Each year we reach out to all of our families that attend charter school. Believe it or not, we don't have all the numbers. So the contact information varies. We get some, they don't call us back, hang up, so those sort of things. But there are quite a folks that might entertain a phone call with them and see if we can kind of figure out what's going on. Why do they go to charter school? And we can persuade them back into the district. From time to time, we get a few back. We've gotten obviously some back from COVID that have gone out from COVID. But yeah, that's where we're at.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Benjamin? Thank
All
you.
right, thanks everybody.
Okay, next up, we have the presentation for the 2024-25 proposed curriculum and instruction budget by Dr. Soder.
So there's actually 4 budgets that we will review. The curriculum development budget, this is the one that covers all instructional materials, software, digital texts, curriculum development, and induction, our staff development budget. This funds our professional development and our part-time staff on full-time professional development days. Our Jumpstart budget, this is the program that we talked about last month. So for students who receive reading or mathematics assistance during the school year, this is the program that we have for those students in the summer, just before the year begins. And KinderCamp is our orientation program for our new students. So we're going to start with the curriculum budget. And one of the things that makes this budget very different from every other budget in the school district is we have a revision cycle. And so we see these sort of increases and decreases in subjects every year, depending on what subject is being revised. So for example, you're going to see a significant increase in science because this is the year that we're working on our science revision. As well, that science budget also supports our STEAM program, and that's still growing and new. Similarly, you're going to see decreases in other areas because they're not under revision right now. So that's why you see the differences for science, for mathematics, for language arts, for social studies. That's reflective of new courses that the board put into our program of studies this fall. So you're seeing the projected costs for some of those new courses. Curriculum writing can be for any of our departments, so we do have that separated out in the budget. Have a larger number for that this coming year, in part because we won't be having a flex day. So we will need to be funding more of the curriculum writing. Software renewals and our library software. So this is actually, when I look at this, obviously it indicates that there's a decrease, but some of the costs for software renewals are in the individual subjects if it's a new subject. So if it's a new digital text, it's actually in the science or in math and the like. So this is actually an area that we really take a look at every year, and this is an area that is increasing, and inflation has not helped us in our licenses and our renewals for our digital products. Have some of our focused professional development is included in this budget, and our special area subjects. This reads as an increase. Our area for this year was music, but actually it was probably comparable to what it was last year for that area, in part because last year with health and physical education, it was single pieces of equipment that were part of the capital budget. And whereas our music items that are included in this budget are not meeting that threshold for capital, so they're remaining in the curriculum budget. I also wanted to mention that although it's not a lot, it's not like access funding for pupil services, but there is a new way that we are generating funds, and that's with our STEAM teachers who have a small and growing group following them on Teachers Pay Teachers. So for example, last month when the group presented at the P&C conference, Teachers Pay Teachers, if you're not familiar with that site, is an opportunity for teachers to put resources that they create online, and other teachers nationally, internationally can purchase those, can download materials and purchase those for a small fee. And so since those items were created here for the school district, those funds are coming back to us. And when they presented during the P&C conference last month, that was like a really big advertisement for some of the things that they had put together, and to the tune of over $900. So it literally covered the cost of their travel expenses and their registrations for that conference. So again, it's not access. it's not bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it is a creative way for our teachers to actually bring back into that department. So we want to move on to staff development. So as I had said earlier, staff development does fund our teachers on in-service days. So our part-time teachers who are with us for a full day, this budget covers those expenses. Substitutes when we can get them for conferences and for professional development days. We have those costs in there. There's software for the department, for our supervision software, and the software that's used for our teachers to track their Act 48 and have those hours sent to the Department of Education. Books and supplies for a wide variety, like our reading specialist program this year and our induction program. And the non-certificated training is actually the other half of Mary White, who works with our department as well as pupil services. So then our two student programs that are part of the instructional budget, Jumpstart. Again, this is for our students who are receiving math or reading instruction, extra instruction during the year. This is their opportunity to come during the summer months at the end of July, beginning of August. And our KinderCamp budget, this is our based on the enrollment for KinderCamp, how many ever sections we need for that. This is the students coming in during a week in August and having an orientation to their new school. These budgets are part of the instructional budgets.
And just question on that last line.
Sure.
We go back to it. So are we just like moving like a portion of some time from Jumpstart to Kindle Camp? That's why it's like a transfer of that 2550.
We do. We
Okay.
do. We
So
take
it's
a
the same
look.
number of
Mhm.
people or hours. We're just moving units around depending on what the need is.
Yes, so we take a look at the staff that's needed for the two programs and then, yes, we put that for how many ever sections we're going to need for that program. And if we have fewer, like if we end up with less, then that is money that we use during the school year after school for remediation. So when we want to provide remediation services for Keystone, for example, and we are asking teachers to stay after school, we use that out of the Jumpstart instructional budget.
Thank you. Do any other board members have any questions for Dr. Soder?
I just had a quick question on the revision cycle. Yeah, the revision cycle. It's science and the special area is music,
Mhm.
and those are the only two.
Right, I mean, we do revision to a wide variety. So for example, we have some things in social studies because we have a new course. We are adding some online courses, so there'll be course development for those. But those are our two big areas. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Soder. Our final presentation in the Finance Building and Grounds Committee section 3.03 is the presentation of the 24-25 proposed technology services by Paul San Francisco. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm here to talk to you about the technology budget for the next year. So the highlights this year, as in every other year we've had, is cybersecurity. We've done a great job of keeping up with the trends with cybersecurity this year with staff, technology, students. I mean, you think about how many devices we have now that are mobile. We really have to do it well. And if any of you know, cybersecurity is number one. We work with the IU, other places, and really have kept up with our cybersecurity. And that's going to be another focus for next year. Chromebooks, of course, 7th and 10th grade, that's our replacement years. So we always replace our Chromebooks in that cycle, and then some network upgrades. So the capital budget was requested. We put this year's current budget in there, and that's where we are right now in this current year. And so next year, as we're proposing, we do a 5-year kind of projection with these numbers of trends and things like that. They change year to year, but required by the budget and the audit and things like that, we have to have a 5-year projection. So we're looking right there at our 24-25, our digital computer systems, of course, are our Chromebooks, our copier, printer, lease there, network upgrades, and replacement computers and projectors for 24-25. Then next slide. And this is the breakdown. Basically, with Dr. Soder's curriculum review cycle, we update technology in classrooms by that. So projectors, anything needed by curriculum. We work with Dr. Soder and her department to see what needs are in the department chairs in that department for any needs for the upcoming year. So we have a couple projectors that are older on a cycle. We use curriculum and they get all replaced there. District-wide staff, laptops, and admin, they're all by cycle also. Other districts do a mass replacement of computers. That hits the budget too much. We've spread ours out over model numbers. So our models get replaced every year. So it breaks the budget down and it breaks us not replacing every computer all at once. So the model year, and that we've kind of balanced it out now. So the models are matching up with the numbers. So it's coming closer and closer to that. But adding new staff, adding new things, that kind of sometimes makes it a little more, a little less each year. And then admin, of course, and teachers in there. There's the Chromebook breakdown, 283. That's how much we spend on the Chromebooks for the students each year with that model. Now, I know you saw that number jump for projection. We always build the number up because new models come out. We may go to touchscreen. We may do other things. But again, that may change. And what we found with technology, as you know, the prices keep going up. Our Chromebook has been steady. We always build for an increase, but it really never gets up to that next year projection number with the bids and the IU and the competitive pricing we do. So that comes down, but we always project out the kind of worst case scenario on that capital budget that never changes. That budget number is always around that $1 million. It never goes up, never goes down. It just stays that constant every year. So that's how we pay capital every year from that. So that number really doesn't change. And then the next slide is the general fund budget. This is non-capital items. This is our contracted site, our site techs, our telecommunications, travel training, general supplies, admin software like Skyward and Linkit and all those things are in there, and dues and fees for anything that happens in the department. Slight increase is because of just contracts going up, prices going up, very modest increases in each. And we expect that each year from our website and things like that, and build that into the budget. And that is the technology budget in a nutshell. Any questions from the board?
I had a question. This might be for Will more than Paul. I know we've talked about more efficient scheduling software for the middle and high school. Is that included in this budget, or where is that initiative?
That is not included in this, but we are in the process of bringing something to you. We'll update you on Boardline later this month. A program that has been vetted by the administration, the high school administration, and technology. Just met with Mr. San Francisco last week to get the go-ahead to move ahead. So we will be bringing something to the board to assist in scheduling.
I can understand the difference between additional computer systems for the students, right, for this year going up to next, this change in technology. What's the drop from this year, from last year?
Drop? From,
Yeah, you've got 360 for the 23-24 year, and we spent 283 this year. Was that a model change? Did we have less students that we were
So
supporting
yeah,
this year? or-
it was kind of a model change, and she got better pricing last year than we did this year. And remember, we purchased them earlier because of the supply. So we locked in and got it before everything went up. So this year is an increase in the Chromebook price for this year and then next year. And we do have more students coming in next year. Yep.
We have any more questions for Mr. San Francisco?
Why Chromebooks?
Why Chromebooks? Okay. So for what we need instructionally, it is the device. And if you look at other school districts, most of them have gone from iPads to Chromebooks also. Easily managed. We can manage Chromebooks much easier than laptops and iPads. Cybersecurity wise, it's the #1 device for cybersecurity because we can deploy everything one shot. If a Chromebook goes missing, we can turn it off. We know where, for Google, everything's connected to Google also here. For Canvas, everything's Google. So that's a Google device and it works. Laptops are much more expensive. We will not use the capacity in the school for laptops. And for any devices we have, we still have computer labs for CAD, things like that. So they're still instructionally here with labs, very little, but like computer aided design, we're doing gaming design, all that stuff. We have dedicated labs for that. The kids use Chromebook as a supplementary device. It's kind of awesome when you walk in, textbooks all there, and it's just the device that has worked for us, manage it instructionally, and cost. Our return on investment is, and we can replace them more efficiently than a laptop. And the viruses on laptops with school districts, we see them going to Chromebooks now too.
Okay, so on the line about copier and printer replacement, it's very consistent. Have we, with the increase in using Chromebooks, have we lowered the number of copiers and printers?
Yeah. So that's a lease. So that's why it's always consistent. And what we found is with Canvas and everything we're doing, students are producing more and teachers getting accustomed more. Now, you're never going to cut out printing. You just come from the classroom, but our students and teachers are conscious of it. Administrative wise, Dr. Stout, Dr. Ryan, Dr. Soder, we've cut copiers in our offices. We've gone to centralized, even in our office, transportation and technology in Warwick, we all share copier services. We've cut down the number of copiers for admin. Students use the library here, as you know, in the middle school, same thing. Elementary, they don't print too much, which is great, but they still have that resource in the library to do that. And teachers really are doing a great job trying to do less and less paper. You're welcome.
rumor is that printer ink is one of the most expensive substances in the world per ounce,
You are at, just, if I'm honest, it's crazy.
more than blood. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. San
Thank you,
Francisco.
Mr. Armas.
I'd just like to open it up to the public if there are any comments on these items as presented. Yes, please. 3 minutes, state your name, township of residence,
So I think I said
into
it
the
fine.
mic, please,
I'm sorry.
for the public.
I've never been accused of being quiet, I don't think. Yeah, so I made a similar comment last year. So, you know, a mentor of mine told me once that, to understand the priority of an organization, look at where they spend their money, right? And if you look at, the budget that Brad inherited, and you look at the gifted services line, it's literally the smallest one at the table by a lot. And it's not even used specifically for gifted education. It's used for the math class, for the accelerated math program, for the seniors in high school. So I guess not really so much of a question, but more as a thought. If someone were to come here from outside the district and look at that table and try to infer what our priorities are, they would assume that our gifted students are literally our lowest priority. That's what they would infer. I know that's not true. I know that's not how we feel about it. But that's what they would think. And I guess it's hard to think about. It's hard not to consider the question, are we doing everything we can for these kids? It's hard not to consider that. And I know a lot of what we do in the gifted population, it's not reflected in that budget. It's in the buildings, in the great gifted teachers we have, the effort they put into it every single day. But when you see it in stark numbers like that, and you remember that that money's not even being spent on specifically gifted education, it's upsetting, actually, to be honest with you. And so again, it's not blaming anyone. I'm certainly not blaming Brad. He inherited that budget and it was used for a different purpose, and I get that. But it's just so black and white. It's so black and white when you see it. So I just leave you with that thought. It's not a question really. It's not even really a statement. It's an observation. I made it last year too. So I would just ask you guys to think about that.
Thanks. I guess, Brad, is that number reflective of the entire gifted program, or is there money somewhere else that is baked into the gifted program
Yeah, I
for the
think-
district?
I think Mr. Las Manos like pretty much stated what I would say, that he understands, and I understand that that money, that's not everything spent on gifted, right? We have building budgets that cover the cost of any type of extra or field trips or anything else that's going on throughout the school year. Obviously, gifted teachers. I mean, we have special ed teachers who are not in this budget; they're in the personnel budget too, as well. But there's, maybe a good way to show in the future what some of those monies look like that are coming out of the building budgets, just as a representation, because, I understand his point, but no, he stated basically what I would say is that it's baked into other parts of the other budgets.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's one thing to keep in mind when looking at these budgets is they're not like full departments. They're not full programs. These are pieces that are, where money's coming from specific sources to fund pieces of different programs or departments, right? Do I have that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's a good opportunity. to be
Like there'd be a different, if we wanted to see what our total gifted program was, or what our total special education or psychological services, that would be a whole completely different chart where we would dice things up. Like we're cutting everything
Yes.
this way, and we have to cut things this way to look at that.
Right, based off of the students that are being, that are serviced too. So if
Okay.
what our population looks like and what their need is. As you know, we've had conversations about some students needing a lot more supports than others and what that cost is. So yeah, it's a good opportunity for reflection.
Thank you. Sure, come on up, state your name, township of residence. 3 minutes.
Carrie Lesmanis, Carrie Culp, Lesmanis, East Coventry Township. Actually, and this is something that, we've talked about a little bit at, some of the stage meetings, Brad, but, actually, speaking of that, I would very much like to request the, possibility of the board, and Mr. Bentman would actually break that down exactly. The deep dive we do into the special education, I'm just wondering if it's possible. I've never in all my years here seen that same type of deep dive done into specifically the gifted services. So, you know, just putting it out there that that might be something that would benefit all of us to see.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's a great comment. And maybe that's something for a future workshop where we have a kind of a presentation on these services, not only budget wise, but also the kind of the, you know, overview of these, because we've seen it on psych support, we've seen it on special ed support a lot, but we haven't seen like this side of it. So that might be a good future workshop item.
Well, and I guess I would add to that, just also understanding whether our gifted support services are in line with what we see other districts around us doing, or if we have differences.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Chairperson, I turn it back over to you. President, sorry, Mrs. President.
We are, thank you, Mr. Harmanos. Moving to agenda item 4, curriculum and special education committee, Mrs. Sabo.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we have 2 things on the agenda, the state special education plan and the mid-year data updates. We will start with our state special education plan presented by Mr. Bentman.
All right, thank you, Dr. Cicito, Mrs. Sabo, the board. So tonight I have an opportunity to talk about the state special education plan. So this plan is every 3 years, that's the cycle. We're actually doing it a little early this year because of COVID and the gap in between each time we present it. So it'll go back to a traditional 3-year cycle. I think we're actually about a year early, which was decided by the state. So go ahead, next slide. This is something that each school district does through state mandate, and our year is up this year. So each year, a different group of school districts present. So it's not every school district every year. So the purpose of the plan is just a commitment to ensure the quality of education that's happening, different programs and services, not only within our district, but outside our geographical boundaries. Keep in mind, I talked about our APS programs, our approved private schools. They're not all in our school district. In fact, most of them aren't in our school district. They are kind of outside the O&J area and could be in a different county as well that our students go to, and talked about the plan. Go ahead, next slide. So just a quick glance at our student enrollment for our students with disabilities that have IEPs. It's just over 1,100, our population of our school district, and then our percentage. So it's increased a little bit, maybe about a percentage. That'll fluctuate. I could pull the numbers in 3 weeks and they're going to look a little different, but not dramatically or drastically different. You can always go on Future Ready Index and find that information, and that's available for other school districts as well. Just part of the state plan is our educational profile for our special education teachers. So we have the left side and the right side of special education teachers, and those are for each of the buildings there. Just a little piece to that, you'll see as we talked about moving to full day kindergarten and what that looks like in the buildings. You can see French Creek's two teachers then moving to North, and that increasing over there within the personnel budget that Dr. Stout presented. You saw a 0.5 increase at East Vincent, and a 0.5 increase at French Creek for next year. And then these are the speech and language pathologists right there. The support. This is solely based off of students that need support. So hypothetically, if we had 100 students qualify for speech and language support at East Coventry, you would see that increase at East Coventry. We have traveling speech pathologists that support our schools. So it's solely based off of our numbers, and really the special education teachers based off our numbers too. Also keep in mind that we have programs in different buildings. So just a quick recap, at East Vincent, we have an autistic support program. We have one. We're going to increase that next year with the help and support of that 0.5. French Creek, we have our life skills support teachers, and our students, drawing a blank here. My goodness, autistic support teachers, we have 2 there. And then at West Vincent, we have autistic support teachers 2 there as well. And then currently in North Coventry, we don't have any specialized programs. And then East Coventry, we have our emotional support teachers 2 over there. And then the middle school and high school are represented. And those obviously include all of our special education teacher supports in the programs. Go back one slide, just historically, speech and language, as students get older, they start to learn their skills for speech and language support, and the numbers decreasing there. So you really only need 1 teacher in both buildings. You have a lot of kids, but as they grow older, the supports and services work, and they start to exit out of support. Okay. So a little bit about our personnel in special education. So we have kind of a plethora of people here. I'll just quickly go down. We have supervisors of special education. We have 3. Important thing to note, on the right, we have district and contractor. And we talked a little bit about that, is like who's a contractor, who's district, right? Our transition coordinator I talked about in that line, that budget item. We have our paraprofessionals. Please keep in mind, this is not 95.6 of a person. We don't have 0.6 of a person walking around. That's full-time FTE, okay? So if I take full-time FTE for all our folks, that's what it comes out to. Most of our paraprofessionals are not full-time, meaning they're not there when the teachers are there for that full day, right? It's a little shorter. Our principals, because they're an extremely important piece to our special education plan, our IEP facilitators. So our school psychologists, so we have 4 district school psychologists, and we have 2 contracted school psychologists. Also, we have full-time school psychologists, 12-month, and then we have 10-month school psychologists. So it is a myriad of not only contracted to district, but then 10 to 12 months there. Our physical therapists, our PT, our OT, occupational therapists, so gross and then fine motor skills. You can see the supports there solely based off of students that are needing. So if we have a huge number of early intervention kiddos that need support in physical therapy, we would need an extra contracted support in that area, right? Our 2 social workers and our behavioral specialists, secondary and elementary, me, and then 14 school counselors. 14 school counselors, 6 at the high school, 3 at the middle school, and 1 at each elementary school. Those are school counselors, not mental health specialists or clinicians. So areas of improvement, right? So the state takes a look at our data and it says, all right, what do you need? What does the school district need to improve on? And these are our 2 goals this year. So students with IEPs, participation in the Pennsylvania system of school assessment. So that is one area or one goal of improvement, something that the state is looking for us to do. Go ahead, next slide. So goal 2 is the gap in proficiency rates for children with IEPs, right? And compared to all students against grade level standards. basically saying that our students with IEPs are scoring at a lower proficiency rate than our students that do not have IEPs. So those are the two areas and areas that we need to work on to continue to invest and train staff in different curriculum and data management practices and supporting our academic discrepancies for our individual students, because we do literally drill down to skills. You know, we're at the macro level here, we're talking, but I mean, micro would be in the classroom working on a specific math strand, let's say in EDM to support students in a specific geometry, let's say standard. So drilling down that deep, and then continue to educate the staff back once again in the data-driven recommendations across all grade levels to inform our instruction. And go ahead, next slide. So the other goal, and it's always a goal of mine for our department and the supervisors as well, is to provide PD in these areas. And I want to make sure everybody understands that this is not a list that is in any particular order. Okay, so it's random order, but autism is a big piece. We want to make sure that we, as we move to full day kindergarten and transition our program to North Coventry, we want to make sure we build capacity, not only with personnel, but we want to build capacity with education, because you need both, right? And that's what that's what the research says. So it's going to be a big goal for us next year over at North Coventry. Positive behavior support. You heard Mr. Stoltzfus talk about behavior at the middle school. So that's an important piece to PD. We want to make sure we train our paraprofessionals. We need to make sure they feel that not only are they part of the team, but they get the education that's needed. So they get trained 20 hours. So mandate is 20 hours a year. They need to get trained. We provide 20 hours, but we really like to go above and beyond those 20 hours. And we bring them in during conference days for that PD and find ways that we can provide their support. We can provide PD for them. Science of literacy, continuing that through Dr. Soder's department. We did that obviously this year, and continuing that. Parent training is something that came up. Another big piece to that as well. IEP development is something that we already kind of working on. We could always get better to helping our parents feel comfortable and being part of a team process through that piece. And then last but not least, the inclusive practices. We continue to beat the drum. I continue to beat the drum. Our supervisors of special education continue to beat the drum that we really need to make sure that we're providing inclusive practices for our students as much as possible. This is always an area that we can improve, and always an area that we can become more educated with to open the door for students to be included as much as possible based off of IEP team decisions. So I'm fortunate to have, I think, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in this room, not including administrators, that attended the SAGE feedback meeting. So six of us in the room here. We have some parents, and we also have a few board members that supported this process. So thank you for coming and being part of that. So SAGE, Special and Gifted Education Parent Group, which was formed, I think, at the beginning of this year. It feels like we've been together for 3 years. I don't know, it's just me. But I think it was formed at the end of last year. Yeah, totally good way. No. Talk to any of them privately. They'll tell you, how I feel about it. And yeah, so definitely in a great way. So we did something unique this year. We had this group of very parents that had a lot of heart and a lot of brain into special and gifted education, and I wanted them to be able to kind of be a part. I want them to be a part of it. So we got feedback on January 18th. We had 16 parents come, a few board members and representatives from the IU. We had a really honest and purposeful conversation and discussion. In fact, a lot of our SAGE meetings are like just open, honest conversations, which are good to hear and good to converse about these sort of things. And we're very grateful of the relationship. So during that parent feedback, when you go ahead to the next slide, Dr. Cicito, we had a guided question: discuss reasons why students receiving special education services should participate in the PSSAs. So it's a parent decision. You can opt out of the PSSA if you have a religious conflict, or if you just want to opt your kid out. All right, that's I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, just sign their kid out of the PSSAs. Um, so, and I know Dr. Stout has talked about this during town hall meetings as well. And you know, we really don't put pressure on students for this. It's changed over the last 24 years since I've been in education. When I started in 2000, the pressure was pretty intense as a fifth grade teacher, and now, you know, it's I think lessened, and we really just want students to be able to handle a rigorous test because they're going to need to do that, right? They're going to need to do that in high school, post-secondary, and even in the job. So there are a lot of good benefits to that aside from the curriculum aspect of things. We want to make sure we feel, you know, included with their peers and have a shared formative experience. Obviously, there's always ways for incentives, but the PSSA is really a valued baseline for students to see where they're at in each of those areas. Go ahead and the next one. Question 2, as a parent, what are some specific reasons you would not have your child participate in the PSSAs? Is this the best way to measure growth for an individual student? You could argue yes and no to that. I feel like we have better assessments that we use, not only the Linkit assessments, but the assessments through Dr. Monahan and Mr. Fletcher. There are pieces that they use and that we have in part of what the students take, the assessments. There's a lot of stress on students with mental health. Testing window is long. That was another thing. And it takes away from instructional time. So those are all the kind of like, why is it kind of a tough thing for kiddos? So go ahead, next one. Guiding question 3, provide some recommendations for professional development for staff and or parent trainings. These were pretty informative. We came up with some pretty good ones, or the group did. Be aware of the emphasis on PSSAs. And that goes back to not really kind of beating that drum all the time and you know, trying to stress the students out and how important they are. More inclusive practices, so testing environments and also not only testing environments, but also learning opportunities, targeted training for students with disabilities, helping parents become better consumers of data. So that gave us the idea of maybe having a parent data session next year. And then PSSA informational session for parents, something that I think we did in the beginning when this whole thing came about in like I said, early 2000s, late 1990s, but kind of got away from some of the parent sessions. But those are some of the good ideas that came up. So next steps, we had the 18th feedback session. Today, I'm talking today. March 18th board meeting. So this is very specific, right? So the March 18th board meeting is the draft plan approval, okay? Then there's a waiting period for parents to view the plan on the website. It's a 28-day waiting period. And April 15th, what happens to be my birthday, I'll be turning 36. I'm gonna go ahead and get the final plan approval. And then April 16th, Dr. Stout and actually Mrs. Peterson will sign off on the plan. So we'll have 2 sign-offs on that through the Pennsylvania Department of Education. So that's kind of the timeline. It is a tight timeline, so we do need to stick to that timeline. So when I bring you these sort of things, if you have any questions as I go through it, please let me know.
I have questions. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to the SAGE meeting. It sounds like I was probably in line with a lot of the feedback that you heard from other parents. In that, you know, I have had a special needs child and a gifted child, so I got the full experience. And we didn't really find that PSSAs were that valuable for either of them. And specifically, you know, when you go into your training for teachers on how to handle students, I really think that linking special needs, whether it is gifted in boredom or an inability to perform to the level of their peers, linking that to anxiety, we really see a huge increase in anxiety. We all know that it's there in our students. And I think that the better that we can enable our teachers to kind of go through their head, and I know they're not allowed to diagnose students, but try to understand the underlying causes for why a student is anxious and look for a diagnosis if the student doesn't have one, and assist the parents in that way. I think, you know, that is super helpful Because if the teachers are able to give some feedback that is helping guiding the right path for the child, everybody benefits. So I'm hoping that your, education, and this is also based on my feedback, talking to other parents of autistic students that are of the same profile as mine, where they meet your eyes, they can answer questions, they interact and joke with other students like a non-autistic child. And so the teachers end up accusing them of not working hard enough once they have a diagnosis and people understand and are instructing them appropriately, suddenly the anxiety that they are experiencing before they had that diagnosis goes away. So that's one comment. And then I guess in trying to understand this, the goals of getting more students with IEPs to take PSSAs, and then the gap in proficiencies of students with IEPs versus, am I understanding goal number 2 correctly? That we are trying to make sure that the gap of students who are deemed proficient is basically the same against our students with IEPs versus students without IEPs?
So basically, our students without IEPs, their proficiency, more students are proficient or advanced than students with IEPs. So there's a gap. So if I took a group of students with IEPs and a group of students without IEPs, there's a gap.
But wouldn't there naturally be a gap since
yes.
we use that as data to feed the process of determining whether a child needs an
Correct.
IEP?
Typically, at times, it's based off of what their disability. It could be a struggle if they have IEP goals in math and reading or the science tested subjects. So that could be a goal. Some of our students with IEPs don't have math, reading, or science goals. So it could be other things that are going on. So it's just that increase. It's really, you know what it really comes down to? It boils down to just is what our general goal is day in and day out in our schools, is to do the best we can to educate our students so they have the most growth possible. So as we do that, the goal is to kind of close that gap as best we can.
So what I'm looking at is, okay, let's just say that you have a student who's been identified with a math need, and so we have an IEP specifically for math, and then that student fails year after year to achieve proficiency on their math PSSA. Is that our failing, the student's failing, or the system's failing? And I have very strong opinions on this, as you may be able to.
Brad, I'll jump in here for a
asking the
moment if you
question.
don't mind. It's the system's failing, so I'll answer that for you. And as far as the gap, you're providing logic to something that isn't always logical. Correct, you would imagine there would be a gap. There are reasons that students are identified for IEPs. Typically, there's a learning deficiency, but I think our goal here is to try and reduce that gap. So if the difference is 50 percentage points between our non-IEP students and our IEP students, can we get that to 30 or 35? So I think it's reducing that gap. I think if we said we were going to eliminate that gap, I don't think that's reasonable, because there's a reason students are identified for those programs. But if we can reduce that and get their proficiency rates higher, that would be helpful and a good plan.
But getting back to my original point, if you're consistently testing a child according to standards that they know they are not going to meet, and they're intelligent enough to understand that they're being tested against standards they can never meet, it's never going to be in that child's best interest.
I think though you also have to look at, so an IEP is like, it's a blanket. So once you have an IEP, it doesn't, except for the student, it doesn't differentiate to say you have a global learning disability, you have a math disability, you have a speech disability. It does for a specific student, but when the state looks at it and they look at their PSSAs, they're not looking at you only have a math, or you only have a speech, you have a global. So when we're getting the results back, some of our students that may have a speech delay, but are not meeting state standards, you have to say why. You have to ask the question, because a majority of our IEPs are not, you correct me if I'm wrong here, Brad, are not students that are globally delayed. They're students that are typically may have a deficit in a certain area. It might not be math, it might not be reading, it could be speech, could be somewhere else. So I think that's when we look at this, So that's the group of students where we need to make sure are, m- you know, staying at state standards. We understand that there are certain students that will be delayed. And I can take this as a parent, mine will always be delayed. And that's okay. Like, it's fine. But that's not a majority of our kids with IEPs.
But if you are taking it at the global level, the way the state is driving us to do, and you're not getting that granularity, I don't think it's benefiting us in our educational model or the student unless we go to that granular level. Level.
So then is it possible to, if you're looking to change the area of improvement, if you're looking to change the goal too, instead of maybe proficiency, could we say growth? Because the growth rate is much different, or is not allowed based on state.
Correct. Yeah, there's certain indicators, and this is the way the indicators are written. At the end of the day, I think we need to go back to what we're doing. It's just teaching kids.
Right.
And all the people behind me, they mostly believe in growth. How is the student growing, right? Achievement's important. I'm not saying it's important. But at the end of the day, we want our kids to grow. We can get them to grow more than a year each year. That's a win. So that's what we believe in. Just real quick, number wise, back to April's kind of point, we have 378 students out of the 1,100 that have a specific learning disability. Speech and language is about 129. So you could be looking at, like, say, students with autism, 132, intellectually disabled, 33. So like those numbers are a lot smaller. Other questions?
Is this also, is it just PSSAs? Plus you mentioned the keystones, like on goal number 1, or is it specific to PSSAs?
Let me go
Let's-
back. Tell me which slide?
It's goal 1, PSSA/keystone assessments.
Yeah, so it would be both. Of the focus typically is PSSA, because there's the way the keystones work. It's the way they take the class and then take the assessment. So keystones are just kind of a different animal. With PSSA, it's more everybody takes them at the same time.
And it talks about, here you talk about parents mentioned feeling included, but are not IEP students taken out of the regular class, put in a special room?
Oh, that's a good question. So we do, yeah, good question. Depends. No, I mean, like, it goes back to the inclusive piece. So they do have accommodations in their IEP, and so if the IEP team meets, right, and the team decides that they need a smaller group, maybe 3 or 4 students in the classroom with with another teacher, then that occurs. We really try to do that last resort. We want the student to be in with the classroom teacher, because it's all about who they're comfortable with. And to Jen's point, it's about relationships. That's kind of what I took a lot about your point, is that if a teacher knows a student, they have that relationship with the student, they're going to be able to, like, kind of gauge that anxiety, either look at it and see what's going on or provide that support. So we really try to keep them in the classroom, but there is an advantage to being also with someone who they're comfortable with in a smaller class. Yeah.
And one more comment to the board. In the legislative and policy breakfast update, one of the speakers asked, like, how many school districts are aligned with the 16% special education student proportion? And I was surprised that the entire room didn't instantly raise their hands. So next time somebody asks you, are you aligned with that 16%? Or are you higher? Immediately say, we're higher. We all gotta beat that drum, because it's one of the things at the state level that I think is very much out of step with the reality of our local school districts.
Any other questions from the board? I believe I need a motion for this one to move to the full board. Yeah, you're on the committee. You have to say.
I make a motion to move this to the full board.
Can I second it?
Second.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Oh, okay. Move. I will open this up if anybody in the audience would like to make any comments.
Thank you.
No. Please state your name and township of residence.
So, Matt Lasmanis, East Coventry Township. I would like to thank Brad and the rest of the team. Actually, when we got started advocating on the behalf of gifted and advanced academics in the school district 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. Having a parent group together across the special ed continuum was something that we actually dreamed of back then, you know, and I think we've had a lot of really productive discussions, and just the ability to bring everybody together and connect and learn, I think in and of itself has been a great kind of outcome. So I wanted to thank Brad for, you know, kind of coordinating and pulling it all together. And I think there's a lot of good the group can do. I think it's just getting started. And I think the partnership with the administration, the board, the teachers, the entire system of our school district, I think is going to be really critical to making some progress. So it's just something we always wanted and thought about, and to see it get started has been amazing, actually. So thanks.
We'll go to our next, we're gonna do the assessment update with Dr. Monahan.
Right. So the curriculum supervisors are going to be sharing the assessment update. You might recall that these tests were part of the mid-year review, so back at the end of January, but our working session agenda was very full in February, so that's why. As opposed to this evening, correct? Right. So with that in mind, they know that they are to be brief. But we're going to hear about how these tests are used. Dr. Monahan will be talking about that really for the whole group, and then a quick look at the data for mathematics and for science. I'm sure she will mention it, but Dr. Lehman will likely remind you that this is the last year for grade 4 having their science PSSA, that will be moving on to grade 5. We'll give you a little bit more about that science update at a later time.
Thank you. So as Dr. Soder said, this is data that was collected at the end of January. Our teachers have already looked at this data and are already responding to it. So just want to keep that in mind. We are giving you a global, kind of the macro view. So this first slide here is to orient you to what assessments we administer and what they do, so how we use them. And so I apologize, and I can't speak to why the color coding is different for each assessment, but this is a legend. So when I go, yeah, I don't control the color coding. So when you log into Linkit to look at the data dashboard and you select the assessments, this is the legend that you see. And so I think the example here is I have 3rd grade ELA for Linkit, 3rd grade ELA for IXL, and 3rd grade ELA for Ames Web 4. So these are the 3 benchmarks. These are given at various grade levels, all 3 in English language arts, the first 2 in mathematics, and just the first one in science. The Linkit benchmark measures the student's progress towards those state standards. And so they report out 5 categories. So you'll see that light blue there is advanced, the green is proficient, orange is what we call the bubble, yellow is basic, and red is below basic. And so the difference for Linkit and our from PSSAs is that bubble group. And that bubble group is actually predicted to be proficient on the state test at the time of the year. It's just that they highlight those students so that we can focus on and target that group for continued growth. Really just shining a light on them to make sure they keep moving in the right direction. Our IXL is a diagnostic assessment that's actually students use throughout the entire school year. We just get 3 snapshots in the fall, winter, and spring. And so that's what we call the diagnostic. And so teachers can assign IXL standards based on their results from Linkit. So they can look at it, let's just say, for example, vocabulary and context on a Linkit score, but then the IXL can actually be assigned to them as practice or remediation, and actually tells the students if they get the response wrong, what the correct answer is and why. So this is something a teacher can assign. It's also adaptive if the teacher chooses to just put the student into the platform and the questions will respond to the student's answers. And the last one is the Ames Web benchmark. This is new to us this year. This is the benchmark that measures foundational literacy skills, kindergarten through 6th grade. A lot more foundational in our kindergarten through 3rd. And students in that also have the 5 categories, and there's well above average, average, below average, and well below. Where IXL mirrors more of what we see on like a PSSA with those 4 levels. And you should also note that the Ames Web was the new assessment that we purchased with our structured literacy grant this year, and that all of these assessments have moving targets. So to be proficient in the fall to winter, the winter's going to have a higher threshold for students to score proficient. So that's the same for all 3 assessments. And I believe Dr. Lehman was just going to briefly speak to the Linkit and how it's differently used in science.
Good evening. I just wanted to make mention that because science is a grade band, that means content is addressed between kindergarten and the end of 4th grade. When we provide a Linkit assessment, we get an analysis, an item analysis of how kids perform. However, some of the content, perhaps where they need assistance with, they learned in 1st grade or 2nd grade. So the 4th grade teacher has 3 topics of study. They can't necessarily go back to light and energy and states of matter and rocks and minerals and everything that happened before they came to 4th grade. So we had to be creative. So we used the Linkit assessment to provide us background information on how the kids actually performed on the assessment. And then we used some learning research. We put together a visual recall with a task, with a problem to solve. And we constructed 12 reminder units. So in 4th grade, when the data said, oh, they have a weakness in light and sound, we provided a light and sound video, and they had to solve a problem and provide a completed task with that. So it was more than just we couldn't remediate them within grade 4. We had to be creative in how we provided that. And it was also, hate to blame everything on COVID, but the grade 4 now, they were in grade 1 during COVID, and they did miss light and sound. So that was a big unit. Grade 8 is a little different because it is also a grade band. It's grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then grades 5 and 6 have an introduction to the content in earth science, physical science, and life. Grade 7 and 8 is a repeat. So we had a little better handle on how kids can perform in grade 8. Thank you.
So this was just an orientation to the data and what it looks like. So if we go to the next slide, this was actually an addition that we did to this presentation based on some feedback. So the score that you see outside of the parenthetical reference there is the score that reported our students last spring as proficient and advanced on the final Linkit benchmark assessment. And the score on the right is out with no parenthetical reference is the PSSA and Keystone score from last spring. The score inside the parentheses for each grade level reflects the score with the inclusion of those bubble students who were predicted to be proficient. And so you can see the scores are pretty close in those results. So we just wanted to be able to give that to you so that you had that comparison. Next slide. Here you'll see we've broken it out now by grade level with the different benchmarks. Ames Web is specific for ELA, not math or science. And we did not give the assessment to our kindergartners in the fall. Having been a former kindergarten teacher, we always joke that Halloween was our okay, they're finally starting to get even getting in a line, especially in a half-day program. So the last thing I wanted were a group of kindergartners brand new to us to have somebody giving them this 1-minute timed assessment and talk about test anxiety, seeing little ones stress out about that. Our 1st graders, having given the 1st grade assessment this year, they came into the assessment room where we were all spread out, and some of them looked like they were going to the dentist. It was not fun. The rest of the grades were fun. So we adjusted in the winter, and we kind of made sure it's a little bit administered a little bit more friendly. But here you'll see our results for kindergarten. And what we do is we look at what areas are needed for students to provide remediation. So in this example, I'd be looking at, you know, letter naming fluency. They may know their letters, they may just not be saying them fast enough for the 1 minute time measure. But we would look at other assessments to make sure and then provide that instruction. Next slide. The same thing for first grade, except here you can see the improvement from fall or September to January in nonsense word fluency, oral reading fluency, and word reading fluency.
For those of us who aren't as familiar with this data, is this the rate of increase you hoped to have seen with data like this?
Well, obviously, we'd like to see it even higher, but it's for being the middle of the year, yeah, and knowing what gaps have already existed for a variety of reasons. Yeah. You can go to the next slide. And here, by second grade, we do a slightly different assessment with our students. We just do the oral reading fluency. And in the winter, we added reading comprehension because we wanted to test that out, because by doing the additional assessment, it gives us a Lexile level. So we will be looking at doing that in the other grades for next year. Again, you can see the comparison. Biggie here for grades 3 or 2nd through 6th. If they aren't on benchmark on that silent reading fluency, we actually do additional survey assessments to figure out what the gaps are in the specific skills. So it's almost like a gated screening. We give everyone it's a quick few minutes to give that silent reading fluency, and then we pull the students who are not successful to find out what they need and provide the remediation. Next slide. So I did not include bubble students because we did name this proficient and advanced, and without having a PSSA comparison, it didn't seem necessary, but if you would like those results, we can certainly add them at a later time. And similar to the next slide, IXL, these scores are higher, but that's because they don't have a bubble population. I'm gonna turn it over. Does anybody have any questions for ELA?
Are the tests different? Does it progressively get harder from fall to winter?
Yes. I would say probably the hardest ones are the fall, because like a Linkit is written for end of grade scores, but the score is lower. The threshold to be proficient in the fall is lower to account for the fact that it's a end of third grade assessment. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. So kind of as Dr. Monahan mentioned, for mathematics, we do 2 similar assessments, right? We do a benchmark, a Linkit benchmark assessment 3 times during the year. We also, our teachers make really great use of IXL from grades 1 all the way up through 8. So that's something they're constantly using in their classrooms. So you'll often see in our elementary buildings, we do a math workshop where teachers break kids into small groups after a mini lesson, and they spend a lot of that time sort of targeting on skills that maybe they're lacking in the everyday math curriculum, but also the work that they're doing in that sort of IXL program. So in terms of, you know, our elementary schools, a lot of these numbers that we're seeing right now, whether it be in Linkit or we'll go to IXL on the next slide, you can see the Linkit assessment up there. Again, I'm not reporting those bubble students, so these numbers would actually be a little bit higher, thinking about where our kids are at, okay? And these are sort of very much in line with where we were at last year at this time, looking at last year's Linkit B. If you move to the next slide, those are our IXL results. Again, you're seeing sort of some of these numbers a lot higher, and the reason for that is that's just the way this is reported out, right? IXL isn't identifying those bubble students. One thing that you'll probably note, middle school math still tends to be a challenge for us, right? That's an area that we're constantly focused on and really thinking about. I spend a lot of time at the middle school working with the middle school teachers. You know, we really are sort of really trying to get at that what can we be doing more for our kids there at that level to sort of see those proficiency rates be much similar to what we're seeing in elementary. Good news is we are seeing us moving in the right direction in terms of PSSA scores. There is an improvement from last year, but that is still an area where we're very much worried. some of the things that we're doing this year, we're constantly looking at our math lab program and thinking about ways to enhance that even more. We've brought some fluency into that this year for our kids. We're noticing even things like knowing their math facts is pretty important to sort of free up that memory, that working memory to do some much more challenging problems. We've really thought about, what are some things we could be doing there to sort of, really make sure kids are getting those fundamentals down, but working back on some of those back skills, but also supporting the current curriculum. And then a lot of our math lab, for our math lab students, that's our support in the middle school. We're actually seeing some really nice growth with those kids. Linkit allows us to tease out some of those typical and high growth numbers, which is really, really helpful. Another nice addition this year, Dr. Soder and Mrs. Crumrine were able to find us some funds to put a math support person in place this year for the back half of the school year. So we have that person pushing into some target math classes of need, our algebraic concepts class, our direct instruction class, a pre-algebra class, and one of our math labs. And just recently, we've had that person start working with a group of students. We started this up the end of last week. We identified a group of students who needed more help in specifically solving equations with rational coefficients, not to bore people, but that's an area of that's pretty important for PSSAs, but also we're starting to think about high school and building in some of those fundamentals. So more of these students will be more likely to be proficient on keystones and just making sure they're prepared going down the road. So we were able to that's where we were able to really leverage Linkit. We can get in there and look at target skills and know exactly what kids need. We were able to identify a group of about 15 or 16 students, and we're able to work with them during that win time at the beginning of the day at the middle school. That's a nice block of time because it's 30 minutes where kids aren't losing instructional time to get that support, right? So when we think about win, it's called what I need for a reason. So we're really trying to target that group and give them what they need. So that's some of the things that we're doing at the middle school. We continue to leverage Linkit to make sure kids are placed in the right places. Thinking about like Mr. Bentman sharing earlier, our curriculum department works really closely with special education, and we're constantly trying to figure out ways to make what we're doing more accessible for kids. So we really look at ways we could, modify curriculum, make it more accessible for kids, thinking about UDL and just giving opportunities to try to close that gap. I think that's like a goal for all of us. So, those are some of the things we're doing at the middle school level. Certainly happy to take questions. The middle school administration is looking at ways to come up with like a schedule where we can access more kids, but that's something that we continue to sort of look at.
Yeah, and that's my question. I know we talked about this, and it seems like the biggest challenge is time.
Yeah.
And when you see the results for winter and you see 27% of kids meeting the standards, the math is so concrete, sequential. I mean, they got to be taught where it is they are having the difficulty.
Yeah.
So, and I guess there's that drive to keep moving through the standards and the curriculum. So it seems like time is the missing ingredient.
Yeah, I think that's something we continue to be challenged with, right? And I think one of the things that comes up in my role often, whether it's a fourth grade classroom, first grade classroom, high school classroom, is like, where do we really focus our efforts, right? Because the curriculum and standards continue to move on. We're being asked to teach a lot of standards, right? So where do we focus our time? Do we work back on old skills, right? Or do we sort of support what's going on in the classroom? So I think one of the things we've really worked hard to do with that middle school lab period is really try to address that, right? We're building in a quick block of time for fluency. I mean, when you think about it, like if it's a seventh grader, we're really working back on like a fourth grade skill, right? Looking and saying we've really looked at that time to try to break it up in a way where we're working back on some of those old skills. We're using IXL to target like weaknesses that they have in the standard curriculum. Maybe they have a fifth grade skill that we have to fill in the gaps for, but we're also using that time to sort of pre-teach some lessons to kids, get out in front of like what they're going to be seeing. We visited several middle schools last school year, and one of our takeaways from some of those was they kind of almost have like a scope and sequence for their lab period. So we try to model some of that and say like, what are the key skills the kids need at certain times during the school year, and sort of align them with content. So like I said, I think we're seeing some nice growth in that group. We'd like to see more growth. When I think about, we really want to see kids growing like 1.5 years. So this kind of keeping pace isn't enough, right? So I think it's something we continue to look at. I know the middle school administration is looking at some different possible scheduling options that might give us more access to kids. I think you know, we kind of talked about this, Dr. Roosevelt. I think one of the challenges is we have that 30 minutes at the beginning of the day. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't have 4 or 5 math teachers available at that time of day, right? So it's really trying to leverage the staff we do have and get creative, but it certainly is a place that we're focused on, and we want to see our kids doing better. So
I think it's important too to mention for like, the rest of the board when you're talking about the 7th and 8th grade and the fact fluency, 3rd and 4th and 5th is when you learn fact fluency.
Yep.
So seeing that this group of students and cohort of students is kind of missing that makes sense, being that that's when COVID was and we weren't in class. So I think that kind of matches up. So I love that you're talking about going back, and even though it's 4th, 5th grade, that's where these kids lost a lot. So
yeah, definitely.
You have to pitch the ball where they can hit it.
We're trying.
So, you can throw a baseball, stuff like that.
Quick comment. I'm just kind of recollecting here. I have a sophomore and a senior in high school currently, but I kind of remember them coming through the middle school math program and being strong math elementary school students. And I believe the comment that they had made was like, the material wasn't really being explained very well. It was more like presented and then learn it on your own and ask questions.
Okay.
So, I mean, you know, that's a anecdotal comment, but that might be,
Would you say that's an experience you're seeing at the high school right now, or you're hearing from your students? Right
no, that was the experience they heard. They felt in middle school,
Okay.
going through middle school math. Yeah.
That's helpful. That's
Yeah.
good feedback. So
Maybe it's teacher dependent. I don't know, but
it could be. Yeah. I mean, certainly different experiences.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Let's talk later.
I don't remember names.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk math. It's something I nerd out on all the time. So thank you.
This last slide is just a reflection of how the kids actually performed in 4th grade, 8th grade, and high school biology. High school biology, as you know, is Keystone. It's an end of course assessment. So in September, when they took the assessment, the course hadn't been taught yet. So it helps clarify why some of the data is where the data is. We're pleased with the 4th grade results so far. And again, as I mentioned, we will be taking a additional video recall and problem-based learning recall to help catch everybody up. And Dr. Soter did mention that I would say something, and I am. Grade 4 PSSA, this will be the last administration this spring. Next year, it will be 5th grade as a field test. So we're looking for the accountability waiver so that it will not count against the district in any way. It's just a field test in grades 4 and 8. However, the high school Keystone, it will continue to be the high school Keystone. It will be by the previous standards. So there will be no field test for the new steel standards for that level. Do you have any questions for me? Thank you.
any questions from the board about any? Any questions from the community?
Hi, Heather McCreary, East Coventry. So my question is for you board members, why, I think it would be helpful since the data is available when these scores are shown, if the scores could be broken down between proficient and advanced. Because then we could focus down on the students who do deserve, and just not the gifted, like you don't have to pass your gifted test to be gifted in certain areas, but to piggyback on what Mr. Lasmanis says, then we could maybe kind of focus on, you could actually focus on the gifted areas. And then you could see, particularly with the math program that has, you know, I see the numbers up here, so I'm an older alum parent now, but this math thing is not new. Like you can say that it's COVID, but it's not COVID. It's not, it's been here for a long time. And there has to be a way to kind of get past that for these students. It's not fair to them. But one way to actually see that would be actually to see proficient versus advanced. The data is there, and I think it would be helpful to you guys when you look at staffing and how you're grouping kids and how many other people and staff members you need to help them out. Because I think if I'm not mistaken, the top level of math that we used to have, multivariable calculus, is no longer here, correct? So the math levels have gone down over the years significantly.
All right. Thank you very much. That concludes curriculum special ed.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabo. We are moving on. Yeah, we really are. We are moving on to Legislative and Policy Committee. Mrs. Munson.
All right, thank you. First, we'll discuss policy 254 on item 5.01. And because we haven't heard from Brad Bentman enough tonight, I'm going to ask him to come up and help me out
Hi,
here.
everybody.
All right, so the first one, 254, is educational opportunity for military children, new policy. So I believe this is something recommended by PSBA.
Yep, this is recommended by PSBA to support and kind of protect the integrity of those in the armed forces, getting their children registered for school. So there's some provisionary pieces in there for 254, and you'll see them actually throughout the other policies that we're going to go over.
All right, and I don't think we'll have any problems with implementation of this. We don't have like a big military base near us that creates a huge inflow and outflow of military students. So, I don't think there's any problems with this. Questions from the committee? Questions from the full board? Motion from the committee to move it forward for first reading?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, next we have item 5.02, which is policy 200, enrollment of students. And the title previously was enrollment in district. And let's see, what changes are we making here? It's really just the additions of the children of active duty military families that go along with the previous one, right?
Yes.
All right. May I have a motion to move
So
that one
moved.
forward?
Second.
We got some enthusiastic folks here. Thank you.
We did our homework.
Yeah, thank you. All right, policy 5.03, section 5.03, policy 202. This one is the eligibility of non-resident students. So similar, just adding wording around the children of active duty.
I
Any
do want to make a
conversation?
comment about this one though. This was the one with the days.
Mm-hmm.
I see that we kept 1 month.
We did. So it's the way it's divided. So, right, so we want, if hypothetically, if family is building a house and they're not in the beginning of the school year, they can start. They have to be in by October 31st. If they're not in by October 31st, then they would then pay 1 month tuition in advance. If they move in November 15th and there are whatever, 10 school days left, then we prorate the payment back to the parent for that. So we did a month because we take the tuition as hypothetically, if it's $10,000 a year and there's 10 months, each $1,000 a month, the hypothetical amount, but pretty probably close to it. So that's why we did a month. So after speaking with Mrs. Crumrine and taking a look at the wish for the policy, that was what was wanted from the business department. It makes sense.
Yeah, I don't have any objections to doing what makes sense, but it was just unclear when I was reading it. And I guess April, maybe you had the same sense that 1 month could be a calendar month, or it could be a 30-day period. Is it meant to be a calendar month? Like if there are 3 days in August and they're moving in?
It's meant to be a calendar month. So
So
you
would
may
they
have
only pay for the
31
2 or 3
one
days in
month,
August?
30 in another, and it's gonna be more than.
No, it's October 31st of August, wouldn't matter. Was not hypothetical.
The only months that would matter would be the months after October.
No, November
Right.
1st through the end of the year.
That's what I said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just
November,
clarifying.
October.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, yeah.
Move in, you don't have to pay anything as long as you're in by October 31st. Then,
Got it.
Then
Okay, so we don't
you-
have to worry about the beginning, only the end, and at the end, it's only June that gets cut off.
no, November 1st through the last day of school would be the period that if they're not in by then, they would have to pay tuition for. They would pay 1 month in advance, and then let's just say they don't move in until December 3rd. We would prorate the number of days. They would pay for all of November. They would pay for 3 days of December. But because they're to pay at the beginning of the month, we would issue them a prorated refund.
Okay, so it does go with a calendar. Could we just say 1 calendar month to make it clear?
We can say whatever you like. I mean, whatever,
Does it matter if we?
for
say
me,
what
it's
calendar
clear,
month?
but
Yeah, I don't think we would need to make the change because it's something that we do administratively.
right,
Jackie's
we would
office
calculate it.
calculates that. So I think we're okay with the current language. But I'm one of 10. So if there's other people that feel it needs more clarification,
Does it matter to anybody other than me, whether it just says 1 month or 1 calendar month?
Do you want to say 1 school calendar month? Is that what you mean? When you say calendar month?
Yeah,
Well,
because
a month is a
1 month.
calendar.
Month is a month.
30 days is
Yeah.
not a month.
Right, could be 31
Yeah.
days, could be 30 days.
Okay, yeah,
29 days in February.
I was confused because we were going from 20 school days to 1 month, which implied a change in days, but if the people reading this for the first time are not seeing it compared to 20 school days, perhaps they won't have any issues with
If it doesn't affect the amount in which someone has to pay based on, because if they move in on December 3rd, they have to pay for all of November plus 3 days in December, then that doesn't.
Yeah, it's still
really matter.
prorated.
Still prorated,
Okay,
right?
all right, then if everybody's clear on 1 month, then
So
may I
moved.
have a move?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. All right, next, we move on to item 5.04, which is policy 217. This is graduation. Title previously was graduation requirements. And the change this time is regarding children of active duty military families again. But also, just a very slight change in some other wording, like the reporting progress and accumulation of graduation requirements. We're not really making any changes to the credit requirements. It's really just the Pennsylvania recommended changes, right?
That's correct. Yep. And we're already actually doing page 3, the superintendent or designee shall annually no later December 1st report to the PA Department of Ed. Graduation information data, we provide very detailed data. High school provides it to Dr. Stout and I, and then we put it into our PA website.
Comments from the committee? Comments from the whole board? Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moving on to item 5.05, which is also regulation 103A, Title IX mandates. As I understand, we actually I can handle this and 104A under section 5.06 together. Both of these are being recommended to be deleted simply because we already follow Title IX. There are plenty of laws and regulations, and essentially our policy is duplicate to those. Did you want to add anything?
You're 100% right. They're no longer needed, so time to delete.
All right. Comments from the committee? Comments from the board? And a motion for both 5.05 Regulation 103A and 5.06 Regulation 104A to move to the full board.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And we can take comments from the audience if anybody has any. All right. All done with legislative and policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Munson. That's about it. I appreciate everyone's attention and all those who presented for us today. I really appreciate your time and attention to especially all of our questions. So thank you.